8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I invite you to rise in body and or spirit for our opening hymn, number 1040, Hush. We'll be singing verses 1 through 3. Let's see if the computer recognizes me. It does. Thank you. I'm Reverend J. Wolin. It's so wonderful to be with you here this morning. You notice I had a mask on. I've come in contact with somebody who did test positive for COVID. I had a few sniffles the day before. I have tested negative 3 days in a row, but just in an abundance of caution, especially when singing. I wanted to just be extra careful, so I won't be coming into the small group meetings later just again to help make sure our community stays safe. So I'm the settled minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota, that's what we are called. We especially want to welcome our visitors today, both here and online on our live stream on YouTube. We invite our visitors to participate in any of the events at this church, and we welcome you to find out more about Unitarian Universalism. We ask you to maybe sign up on our visitors book online. We have a register that you can sign up on, or right outside the door here at our welcome table you can sign up, and you will get a weekly newsletter that tells about all the events that are happening here, and then the occasional other email for important events as determined by someone who thinks they're important. Anyway, we also have coffee and conversation after every service outside in the courtyard there as well. Today we'll be having some congregational conversations, which you'll hear more about. I also want to bring to your attention adult religious education class starting this Thursday in person in the evening. World religions. This month will be about Judaism, and we'll go once a month through April, talking about different world religions. And then we will repeat that on Sunday afternoon on Zoom. You can look in the newsletter, check the office. Also, if you are looking to learn more about Unitarian Universalism, next Saturday from 9 to 12, and this is open to anyone, whether you're new to UU or you've been a long-time member but just want to learn more about Unitarian Universalism in this congregation, just please sign in at the office so we know how much snacks to bring and that we have enough people. And so, and also, one more thing, sorry. I hope you'll come next Sunday. You'll see an article in the newsletter this week. We will be having a ministerial intern this year at the congregation. Next Sunday will be her first Sunday visiting with us. And so please come and greet her. And I'm sure there will be cake. And now it is my distinct pleasure to invite Jane Hoffman to share her beautiful gift of music with us. Thank you. opening reading is from Mary Oliver called Sunrise. You can die for it, an idea or all the world. People have done so brilliantly, letting their small bodies be bound to the stake, creating an unforgettable fury of light. But this morning, climbing the familiar hills in the familiar fabric of dawn, I thought of China, India, and Europe. And I thought how the sun blazes for everyone, just so joyfully as it rises under the lashes of my own eyes. And I thought, I am so many. What is my name? What is the name of the deep breath I would take over and over for all of us? Call it whatever you want. It is happiness. It is another one of the ways to enter the fire. And so now as we light our chalice, please join with me in affirming our fourth principle, which will be up on the screen. As we light this chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, we affirm our fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
Good morning. So nice to see all of you here. Today's story is The Word Collector by Peter H. Reynolds. Collectors collect things. Some people collect stamps. Some people collect coins. Others might collect rocks. Some collect art. Some collect bugs. Others collect baseball cards. And some people collect comic books. And Jerome, what does Jerome collect? Jerome collects words. He collected words he heard. Certain words caught his attention. He collected words he saw. Certain words just jumped right out at him. He collected words he read. Certain words popped right off the page. There were short and sweet words and two-syllable treats and multi-syllable words that sounded like little songs. There were words he did not know the meaning of at first, but they were marvelous to say, like aromatic and vociferous and effervescent. There were words whose sounds were perfectly suited to their meaning, like Tyrannosaurus Rex and smudge. Jerome filled his scrapbooks with more and more of his favorite words. His collections grew, and he began organizing them. Dreamy, science, sad, action, poetic, and one day, while he was transporting them, Jerome slipped, and his words went flying. And as he began to pick them up, he noticed his collections had become jumbled. There were big words next to little words, and sad words next to dreamy words. And Jerome began stringing words together, words he had not imagined being side by side, like savor and dreams, cascading and stars. So he used his words to write poems, and he used his poems to make songs. They moved, they delighted. And some of his simplest words were the most powerful, like, I understand, I'm sorry, thank you, and most importantly, you matter. So Jerome eagerly collected more and more of his favorite words, and he knew that the more he collected, the more he understood, the more clearly he could share with the world what he was thinking and feeling and dreaming. And so one breezy afternoon, Jerome climbed the highest hill, pulling a wagon packed with his word collection. And he smiled as he emptied his collection of words into the wind. He saw the children in the valley below, scurrying about, collecting words from the breeze. And Jerome had no words to describe how happy that made him. So that's the end of the story. But it points out that words matter. Just imagine if you had no words, how much more difficult would it be to communicate? It's like playing the recent game I recently played called Poetry for Neanderthals, which I think every erudite UU should try. So go out and look it up. So what words we use and how we say them matters. The same words can mean different things to different people. And sometimes a word that I use will trigger a different reaction than I intended. And if that happens to you, it's okay to say, hey, when you say this, it makes me feel or think or fill in the blank that. Because if you don't say those things, then the person who innocently made you feel or think or whatever won't know. And then you can't talk about how those words and their impact might be. It takes courage. And as Jerome realized, the more words we knew, the more clearly he could share with the world what he was thinking and feeling and dreaming. And we each have that same power. Now the trick is to have open minds and open hearts to truly hear and honor the other person's thoughts and feelings and dreams without our own words getting in the way. So now I invite our younger UUs to join their teachers in their classrooms where we'll focus on words of welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Beautiful. Our centering in words today are a poem by David Whyte called The House of Belonging. I woke this morning in the gold light turning this way and that, thinking for a moment it was one day like any other. But the veil had gone from my darkened heart, and I thought it must have been the quiet candlelight that filled my room. It must have been the first easy rhythm with which I breathed myself to sleep. It must have been the prayer I said, speaking to the otherness of the night. And I thought, this is the good day you could meet your love. This is the black day somebody close to you could die. This is the day you realize how easily the thread is broken between this world and the next. And I found myself sitting up in the quiet pathway of light, the tawny, close-grained cedar burning round me like fire, and all the angels of this housely heaven ascending through the first proof of life the sun has made. This is the bright home in which I live. This is where I ask my friends to come. This is where I want to love all those things it has taken me so long to learn to love. This is the temple of my adult aloneness, and I belong to that aloneness as I belong to my life. There is no house like the house of belonging. I now invite us to take a moment in silence to contemplate what makes us have a sense of belonging here in this place, our home of belonging.
Good morning. I am Bill Payton, and I currently serve as the president of the Board of Trustees, and thank you for your trust in that position. So my name is Bill. I've been called worse. And I actually married that woman twice. So this morning we're talking about a discussion that's been going on now for about 9 months. And the idea is to come up with the name that best describes our identity. And I want to start first by thanking our committee of Ava Whaley, Lisa Ellis, Margie Henry, and of course the staff here whose help is invaluable. Ultimately, 5 names were submitted to you through a series of surveys, and it was a weighted survey process, and those names were, and I'm sure you're familiar with them, but I abbreviate the UU Church of Sarasota. This is a little high for me here. The UU Church of Sarasota, the UU Congregation of Sarasota, Suncoast UUs, UUs of Sarasota, and UU Community of Sarasota. Over 270 of you participated in the survey, ranking your preferences, and as a result, 3 names remain in the running. And again, I abbreviate UU Congregation of Sarasota, UU Community of Sarasota, and UUs of Sarasota. So you will have 2 more opportunities to influence the outcome. First, a final weighted survey will be emailed to you this afternoon, and you will once again be asked to choose to state your preference, your first, second, and third choices. You may not vote for the same choice 3 times. The deadline for submitting the survey or returning it is next Sunday at midnight. The selected name will be announced following the board meeting of September 19th. So we want you to know as soon as possible what that final chosen name is. The highest ranked name, or the name that you all choose, will then be submitted for approval of our membership at a special congregational meeting on Sunday, October 15th. Eligible members will be able to vote either live in the sanctuary or via Zoom. And we're sorry, but this issue cannot be voted on by proxy. It's also important to note that currently our name is the Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota. If the name submitted for approval on October 15th does not receive 2/3 approval, then our name will remain Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota. So you must think about, you like one name better, you have your favorite, but maybe another one comes in. So you have to think about how you want to identify our church and how you want to vote on that issue. But if we do not receive 2/3 approval of that final name, we will remain Unitarian Universalist Church of Sarasota. And if that happens, then you, the membership, has spoken. If you have any more questions about this, please attend our congregational conversation in the Reeb Room. Following today's service, just grab your food and come on into the Reeb Room and we can talk about it more personally. There will also be a Zoom conversation this afternoon at 2:30, and the link for that meeting was sent to you all yesterday. And as you might imagine, as UUs, we all have different opinions. Speaking today as champions for the eligible names, we have Jeff Ellis, Louise Machinist, and Don Carey. So please give them your attention as they come up in that order. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Ooh, sorry about that. What a name is has really recently had some importance to me. Everybody knows me as Jeff, but Jeff is actually my middle name. And for years, people would walk up and say Neil, and I would look for my father, because we shared the same first name. So using a name that's not been my legal first name really took on importance for me when the school board sent home a form at the beginning of this year so that my son AJ could get called AJ at school. AJ has never been called Anthony. He's always been AJ for 9 years now. So what our name is, what we call ourselves, has really had high importance for me for the last couple of weeks. So it's an interesting coincidence for what we're going through here at the church. My journey to you being a UU has been long. It started with 13 years at Catholic school that I'm still recovering from. And has had its highs and its lows. Time as an atheist. Time is what I now call myself an agnostic humanist. But in the end, it's the value system of being a UU that I have found most important. The name, Unitarian Universalists of Sarasota, I think gives us the opportunity to be the most inclusive and least restrictive of any of our choices that are up there. We want to try and broaden our audience, broaden our congregation, broaden the people that we are trying to bring in. We want to be inclusive to try and increase our diversity. And I think this name under consideration certainly gives us the best opportunity to reach the largest audience that we can get to. The other thing to think about is, this is a process. This has been 9 months, Bill. Do we really want to ever do this again? Which is a legitimate question. Is this something that we want to have to tackle 10, 15, 20 years from now? Is this something that, we're going to leave to my children to try and reconsider 20 years from now? So bring an open mind and think about it as you choose. But my suggestion, my feelings for Unitarian Universalists of Sarasota being our best choice. Thank you.
Good morning, Unitarian Universalist community of Sarasota. I love the sound of it. When I lived in an intentional community, before special meals, we often recited or even sang the words to hymn 402 in our Unitarian hymn book. These are the words: "From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live." That's community. Community, a word that people understand on an emotional level. It invites. Come into this community that we have co-created, where you are warmly welcome. Community, our longed-for human home. Community is beautiful. A healthy community shares important common attitudes, values, and goals, but not dogma. Community celebrates the diverse gifts that each member brings. Congregation has different connotations, not about the people per se, but the location and the traditions of religious worship. The terms church or congregation automatically leave many people out. We're not the building, we are the people. Community identity propels us forward as we attract and nurture small, diverse communities within our larger UUCS community. Research tells us that loneliness is a growing American problem. Dissatisfied with doctrinaire churches, many people seek community connection without theology or hypocrisy. They crave a healthy community of shared values, mutual support, connection, and caring, both for themselves and for their children. Vibrant communities engage people with purpose and social action. And according to one source, the Common Good Collective, vibrant communities are often cool, unique, even quirky places. That sounds like us. Community is about what people do collectively. It reflects our 7 or 8 principles. It's about building right relations within this tangled web of existence. This is what people are desperately seeking. We need to reach out and welcome with a name that seekers immediately understand. Cicero, the philosopher, said, "We were born to unite with our fellows and to join in community with the human race. So let's just say so right up front with our name." Thank you.
Morning all. Why I favor the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Sarasota for the new name of our beloved society. Find definitions of congregation. It's an assembly of persons, especially for worship, a group that habitually meets so, a religious community or order, an act or incidence of congregating. My dictionary says the church is a building for public and especially Christian worship. If you don't consider yourself a Christian, you probably would prefer some other term. We offer ourselves as an alternative to traditional religions and welcome all to be with us. I've heard visitors ask what UUs are about, what we believe. This can lead to some interesting discussions, and I'm sure that many of us have shared these kinds of talks with visitors. I'm certain that most of us understand what a congregation is. Every week, we UUs congregate on Sunday to worship and be with kindred souls. We UUs are not always good at marketing. I've been a visitor to a UU congregation and stood around with the special visitor coffee mug in hand and not experienced a welcome from anyone. Everyone in the room seemingly wrapped up in their own conversations, which we're usually pretty good at. Since our sign is an introduction to the passing public, we should attempt to make a positive impression for the very few seconds that people pass by. Words have meaning and convey a message, and our sign is a medium for this. As been mentioned, some are put off by the word church, so let's not say church. Our sign will simply imply that you are welcome to this congregation of seekers, and this building can be a welcome home to the viewer. Come and be part of our congregation. Just let the passerby know that you are welcome here. Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to say, whatever name we eventually choose, I do think 15 years from now, we're still going to have this same conversation. Even if we choose to change our name, that's just the nature. And you know, we will be different, just like we are different now than we were 15 years ago. And this is not the first time we have had this conversation. And so I think it'll be, oh, somebody moved my mouse, okay. So now, you know, it doesn't matter what our name is. Every week, we are going to have an offering here for the work that this church provides. We ask you to be as generous as you can. For those in person, there'll be a bowl. For those online or in person who have a cell phone, you can use the QR code, or there is a link in the YouTube channel. Thank you for your generosity, and let this sacred time begin. That's right. Our next reading is an excerpt from a sermon, What is Your Name, by the Reverend Dr. Herman Watts. The nature of a person's name depends upon their endowments. A person, to answer to their true name, must recognize that their name is different from all others that ever walked the face of the planet. Nature's God is so resourceful that it breaks the mold and destroys it forever. We waste our energies and torture our years trying to be like someone else. Each person has a name that no other can bear. There is a beauty, a strength, and a glory that each person has on their own. The whole universe is thrown out of kilter when you shrink from your magnanimous responsibility. There is a huge slot you must fill. When you have drunk from the social stream of the human family, you can see from a vantage point others cannot climb. The full sweep of recorded history passed before your eyes in a panoramic procession. You have seen many of the mistakes and the hard-won insights of the human family. Now, from the vantage point, you must take your place. Better still, let your place take you. If a person is to be freed from their frustrations and insecurities, they must surrender to something larger than themselves. They must attempt to see life from the angle of eternity. Our lives must deal with the only thing on the planet that is eternal, and that is the human personality. And now, one last time, some special music from Jane Hoffman. So the reading today, the inspiration for this sermon, came from the father of a childhood friend of mine, Dr. Herman Watts, who served Friendship Baptist Church in New York City. Although growing up, I never realized he was a minister. He lived 2 doors down from a hospital, so I just assumed he was a doctor. That's how lack of curiosity we had about parents in those days. But the sermon which I read the passage from was opening words, was recognized in the book Best Black Sermons, published in 1972. So kudos to Dr. Herman Watts. So we're all given names at birth. In the Jewish tradition in which I was born, we are traditionally named after a relative who is already dead. I was named after my great-grandfather, Jacob Walasinski. Now, like many immigrants who came to this country, his name was shortened to Wolin, taking away his ancestral name. But what did it really mean? Some in my family have speculated that he was Jacob from the town of Walasinski, which is an adapted translation of the Polish word for Vilnius in Lithuania, because we knew he lived right in a small town outside of Vilnius. So coming to America after constant violent anti-Semitic attacks, that part of his name did not seem that important to him. And when I was named just 14 years after the Holocaust ended, my parents thought it best for my safety to have a less biblically Jewish-sounding name and maybe one that was more Americanized. So Jacob became Jay. Who knows what my life might have been like if I had been named Jacob, we can hypothesize about that. Jacob may have been old-fashioned at the time of my birth, but it did end up being the most popular name in 1999. And I admit, after the Twilight series came out, for those who don't know, it was a very famous book and movie series about vampires and werewolves. I was definitely on Team Jacob there, the werewolf. But Reverend Watts was not talking about a literal name. He was talking about what is our purpose in the world. What is it that makes us unique as a human being? What is our natural talent or desire or skill? And how does it align with the needs of the world? What is the most important reason for our existence? Now, we recognize this in our child dedication and naming ceremony. We say, and I quote, "This is the time to recognize our children by name, for it is by name that each of us is acknowledged as a unique and separate person." Our children's religious education, and I would hope our adult religious education, instead of telling children and adults what to believe, it creates an environment that is geared to allow the person's personality and abilities to unfold and be nourished. And this unfolding of our personality is a lifelong process. And this is as true for us individually as it is for us as Unitarian Universalists and this religious organization. How to discern and recognize our gifts and where they are needed is a lifelong learning process and may be different at different times in our lives and at different points in history. And similarly with Unitarian Universalism. Circumstances, upbringing, and societal pressures often delude us to ignore or forget or bury our true name. But with courage, nourishment, and intentionality, we can find it and act with it. The story of recognizing our true name is ancient. In the Hebrew scriptures, at crucial parts of their lives, Abram becomes Abraham. Sarai becomes Sarah. Jacob becomes Israel. Their trajectories in their lives had changed. And to recognize that change, their name changed. I particularly think of the story of Joseph in the Jewish scriptures. Joseph was the son of Jacob. If you remember, he was his father's favorite child and was given a coat of many, many colors. Right? If you remember that story or play. Right? So due to this favoritism, his brothers beat him and sold him into slavery. I am glad my siblings were not that angry with me. Although sometimes they did lock me in a doghouse once, but that's another story. Joseph, though, his actions over the years, he goes on to become a trusted advisor to the Pharaoh in Egypt. And when famine sweeps his land, he welcomes and forgives his brother and father and saves them from starvation. In this story, we see the arc of the changes in his life, from being in favor to becoming a slave to being back in favor. His first name was bestowed on him by his father, by his upbringing. His second name as a slave came to him as a result of the actions of others. His last name was one that came naturally to him when he fully utilized his natural talents, and those talents were recognized by those around him. By being authentic to who he was, Joseph found his purpose and was no longer threatened by the emotional turmoil of anger at what had been done to him, and he flourished and was able to forgive others. For he knew his true name. And at this points out, sometimes we have to leave what we have known, whether safe or unsafe, the place where others try to name us, in order to find our own name. In Egypt, Joseph is given a new name, Zaphanath Paneah, which is roughly translated revealer of secrets of life. Reverend Watts wrote, and I quote, "We waste our years on making a living instead of living. We spend our time playing it safe. Life is not intended to be safe. A safe life is a small name," end quote. And so I think of the story in the Bible again of Moses, who was a prince in Egypt. He had a safe life with the comforts of the palace. And then he found out the deep truth about who he was, that he was really Jewish, and he struggled with that truth. And he fled to the desert and became a farmer. He could have lived a safe, quiet life for the rest of his life that way. But that was not what he was called to do. Only when he found his purpose, which was to free his people, and he had the courage then to follow his purpose, was he willing to risk his safety, willing to risk everything. And by doing so, and not without difficulty, he became fulfilled, and he changed the world. And I can imagine people saying, well, I could never be like Moses, right? I could not overthrow a pharaoh, or defeat a governor and change the world. And then I am reminded of the story of the Hasidic Jewish teacher, Rabbi Zuzia, who on his deathbed said, in the coming world they will not ask me, why were you not Moses? They will ask me, why was I not Zuzia? And so often others name us. Sometimes it is a limiting belief others have of us. Sometimes it is others' desire for us to conform, to be who we are not. And so often, sadly, we internalize others' names for us and no longer follow the path that is ours and ours alone. So as I read in the opening reading, Reverend Watt said, we waste our energies and torture our years trying to be like someone else. The whole universe is thrown out of kilter when you shrink from your magnanimous responsibility, end quote. It's hard for us to imagine, right? Any one of us can throw the universe out of kilter. Yet I am reminded of our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. And we are each a part of existence, no more, no less than any other person. And if we believe that, if we believe we are truly interdependent, then what we do in the world matters. Every interaction matters. Every creative spark matters. Every act of love matters. And we should not compare ourselves to someone else, but rather on being who we are and what we are capable of being. Being who we are called to be, with no apologies and no regrets. Just doing the best we can in a given moment in time to reach our potential. And sometimes it takes us a while to realize what we're called to do, what song we sing in the universal choir, what piece we are in the evolutionary puzzle, what role we have in the unfolding expansion of creation. Our lives are always changing with every new experience that we have. We are always in the process of becoming someone new with each new experience. It's never too late to do what you can now. And so I ask you to think about what your role you are being called to do at this time in your life. Where does your unique ability fit the world's need, this community's need? And we ask those same questions about Unitarian Universalism as well. What role are we being called to do at this time in our history? Now, on October 15th, we will be voting on whether we should have a new name. And this will be an intentional decision by the members to say how we wish to be identified. And there are real reasons that each individual, each member may have of why they identify with or find meaningful one name versus another. Ultimately, you, the congregants, will give us our true name by whether you show up or not, whether you share your hearts or not, whether you grow or not, whether you donate or not, whether you lead or not, whether you work for justice or not, whether you love each other or not. So whatever you formally name us, I invite you to act with love as part of our true name. May it be so. I invite you now to rise in body and or spirit for our closing hymn 121, We'll Build a Land. In light of acting with love, we've adapted the words a little bit. So where it said sisters and brothers, we will say people together. And where it says anointed by God, we will say anointed by love. closing words are also from the Reverend Dr. Herman Watts. Whether you see the beckoning of the stars or not, or if you hear the whisper of eternity or not, if you are willing to lose your life to find it, if you are willing to reflect the promise of the sunrise for the sunset, then move forward. At the core of reality, there is life and love and dependability. Stand tall and make a difference. No obstacle can stop a life committed. Please join me now in extinguishing the chalice. The words are on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you all for your presence here today. Please remember, congregational conversation will happen in the read room as soon as you get your food from the potluck. Thank you again for being here.